What happens when your supervisor publicly says, "You're last. You're not a priority"? To him, you're just the least valuable employee. But when the company's biggest client walks in and calls you my miracle worker, the whole office freezes. Tell me, what could possibly go wrong if you just decided to bring people lunch? I mean, really? I bought 20 burritos, bagged them myself, even labeled them. For the team. Thank you. Yeah, that's who I am. I wasn't asked. I just knew everyone was exhausted, and if any of them missed lunch because of a deadline, I would see it. And I wouldn't let them. I got to work early like I always do. You know, in this office, being punctual is like being a piece of furniture. No one notices. But I'm not here for applause. I just believe that if you work with people, be human. I put the packets out neatly in their places. I signed each one. Yes, it took me an evening. Yeah, no one asked me to. But damn it, it had to mean something. You know how they thanked me? When I walked past reception, Dean, my supervisor, didn't even look up. He just mumbled, "You're the last one for lunch today. We have important people in the office. You're not our priority." He said it as casually as if he was explaining where the coffee was. And everyone pretended that it was okay. That I could just be pushed aside because someone with a business card was more important than me. I stood there with that burrito in my hand like an idiot. No one even noticed that I was the one who brought them. The employees reached for their food silently, with their mouths full and phones in hand. Someone even ate too. But what about me? I stood at the window because there was no room for me at the table. And right there, through the damn window, I saw a black sedan pull up to our building. Not a limo, but it had character. A man in a suit got out of it, looking like he was on the cover of a magazine, and headed confidently toward the front door. I wondered who he was, and why no one ran to greet him. But you know how it is in our office, if you're not fired, you're not in the way. 5 minutes later, the whole floor knew someone important had arrived, a client. One of those people who can make or break a project with one phone call. I thought, let's see who's the real professional here. And then I found out that no one had met him. He was standing at the front desk alone, waiting. Dean, of course, was in a meeting. Turns out he was just having coffee with HR. How about that? So the last one at lunch, not a priority, the woman with the burrito walked up and said, "Good afternoon. Would you like some water? There's a room available right here. Come on in and I'll show you around." He nodded. No arrogance. Just looked into his eyes and nodded. And then he sat down and started looking at the paperwork. And you know what I saw? There was a report on his clipboard. Our report. Only it had a mistake on the very first page. The formula was wrong. And it wasn't my mistake. Because I wrote that part of the report 6 months ago, and I wrote it correctly. He was polite. But I could tell he wasn't happy. So I sighed and I said, "Can I take a look at it?" He nodded. And just like that, with his permission, I opened the laptop and showed him how it should be. No ponces, no excuses. Just the fact. 2 minutes later, he said, "Do it right. I'll wait." I sat in the adjoining meeting room while he checked my story. My heart was pounding like I was at the doctor's office waiting for the verdict. But I wasn't afraid for my position. I cared about something else. That at least someone would finally see that I knew what I was doing. That behind those assistants, and "Can I talk to you for a minute?" was the man who had kept this company afloat for 10 years while the boys in suits played "We're in charge." It's been about 10 minutes. He looked up from the screen and simply said, "Thank you." No applause, no fanfare. But it was a thank you with understanding behind it. And then he asked, "Who are you? I didn't see you in the letters and lists." I grinned. Because just that was the whole point. "I'm someone who usually gets passed over," I replied. "Not by qualifications, but by convenience." He nodded. And as he was about to leave, he said, "If they don't listen to you, they're afraid. Keep it up." And that's when Dean walked in. With a face like he'd just forgotten to turn off the stove at home. He didn't even say hello to the customer right away. He just looked at me, then at the tablet in his hands, and he said, "I'm sorry, sir. She's not authorized to handle analytics. We'll figure it out. We'll handle it." Handle who, Dean? The person who single-handedly fixed your mistake while you were reading memes on your phone? I felt my fists itch. But I smiled. Because the client, he wasn't the performance type. He stood up quietly and said, I don't care about credentials. I care about results. After that, he left and the office was so quiet you could hear someone's stomach rumbling. Later, a message came into the general chat room from Dean. Thanks for the quick response from the team. Working smoothly. Team? What the hell team? I was the one sitting on that file. I made his coffee, and I told him where the spare room was too. But to them it's still teamwork. And then the cherry on the cake. A letter arrives. As of tomorrow, you are temporarily transferred to the administrative group. No access to project analytics. That's it. You did the work, you get penalized. Because you can see too well who is really skilled, and who just knows how to be there when you need them. The next day I came in as usual. 8 o'clock sharp. Because, strangely enough, I still had the conscience to be on time, even if you were belittled. And what do you think? My workstation was right by the entrance next to the printer. No chair. Just a box of papers and a temporary sign. Colleagues walked by and didn't say hello. You know how it is, they pretend you're not there because they don't know how to treat you anymore. It's like you're still here, but you're not one of them anymore. It's like you have leprosy. I caught a glance from Christy, the girl I'd helped with the report at the review a month ago. She took one look, lowered her eyes and walked away. Not a word. Not a hi. No hang in there. I sat, sorting through papers and listening to Dean bantering with the team behind the glass partition. They were discussing last night's meeting, as if I hadn't been a part of it. Good job. Well done, everyone. Everyone. Are you sure you were even in the room? And that's when I realized they're all comfortable. As long as you're the one who brings the burritos, who stays late and doesn't demand recognition, you're safe. But as soon as you show you can do more, they hide you. They take you away. Because the truth, my dear, is more terrifying than any mistake in a report. Especially when it comes out in full voice. But the funniest part? A guard came up to me. Mike. Good old Mike, who greeted me every day with a smile and a, "How are you doing?" He sat down next to me on the box and said, "I saw how you handled that guy yesterday. Good for you. They're all here with papers and you're the one with the brains." That's what got me. Even the guard realized what happened. And the warden, he made it look like it never happened. I don't know what they were hoping for. That I'd break down? That I'd just quietly type papers and stop thinking? Surprise, guys. I can think even when you're hiding my ideas under other people's names. That night I didn't go home right away. I sat in the same meeting room where I'd sat with the client yesterday and turned on my laptop. Wrote an email to myself. Not to them. To myself. Wrote everything I stand for. Everything I've done over the years. All the projects I've saved, everything I've written, drafted, checked. Because sometimes you just need to remind yourself who you are. Not for the sake of LinkedIn. For the sake of your spine. I don't know what's going to happen next. And honestly, I don't really care that much. Because in this office I'm no longer invisible. They can try to corner me, they can pretend I'm just an assistant. But now at least one person has seen who I am. And that's gone. And tomorrow I'll be back at 8 o'clock. With my mug, my files, and with the knowledge that I'm not the last one. I'm just the one who comes first. Before I left, I went to the bathroom mirror. Yes, the one where women are always discussing diets and vacations. I looked at my reflection and smiled, because I no longer saw a tired assistant who could be cut out of my correspondence. I saw a woman who had endured humiliation, and was still standing. And when I walked out, I purposely walked past Dean's office. He was writing something, didn't look up. And I did. I stopped. I stood there for a couple seconds, and I just said it loud and clear. By the way, the burritos were from me. And I walked on. Let him digest. What happened next changed everything. Subscribe and stay, you don't want to miss how it unfolded. When I walked into the office on Monday, it was as if the walls knew. As if they were whispering amongst themselves. Here comes the one who dares. I'm not exaggerating. Sometimes silence is louder than words. And when you become too conspicuous, even doors begin to close with a slight creak of rebuke. I was walking through a minefield, and every glance was like a secret protocol. Someone looked away. Some pretended not to notice. But the worst were those who nodded with pathetic politeness, as if I were someone else's problem, not their own fear. I knew it was about to start. And it did. The first thing that happened was that my access to the project platform was cut off. No explanation. Just, you don't have permission to view this page. I rebooted. I checked again. No. That's it. As if dozens of months of my work could be erased with the push of a button. And they did. I went to our IT guy, Miguel. He and I have always been on good terms. He looked at me guiltily, as if he would have been happy to help, but he'd already been warned. It wasn't me, he mumbled. Orders from above. I'm sorry. And that, I'm sorry sounded like the end of the shut up and sit tight sentence. Because it was done. Someone up there had already checked the box next to my name. But I wasn't going to sit there. I went down to the second floor where finance sat and found Ella. She was one of the few people who had ever had a serious conversation with me that didn't boil down to, "Oh, you're the one that helps. Ella, did you see the client who came in last week? Harrison." She nodded, keeping her eyes on the spreadsheets. "Did he say anything after the meeting?" Then she broke away and said slowly but clearly, "He stopped by the principal's office, and he said you were the only one who knew what you were doing." I froze, because those words didn't mean gratitude. It was a challenge. When a client openly acknowledges your contribution, in a company with that structure, that's not a gift. It's a threat. Then you wonder if you should ever do better than what they asked you to do. Because, as it turns out, when you don't just perform but start to shine, you are extinguished. Methodically, coldly, without panic. Just putting out the lights around you so you become a shadow again. The next day, I was given a temporary assignment. Translate dozens of pages of contracts, make hard copies, sign by hand. Not a word about analytics, not a hint of my primary area of responsibility. It was like I was back in 1995. Folders, pens, stamps. Just don't forget to alphabetize, or it's a violation of regulations. I sat at the desk outside the warehouse and felt something change inside me. Not just anger. Not resentment. It was disgust at how easily I'd been turned in. How everyone I helped sat in their corners pretending nothing was happening. You know what hurts the most? It's not the withdrawal. It's the silence. The sepulchral polite silence where everyone realizes that you're being treated unfairly. But no one will say a word. Because everyone has something to lose. I guess I don't. And then in that silence suddenly there was a bright moment. Harrison wrote to me. In person. A short letter. "I'll need your comment on the calculation model. I insist you oversee it." He even copied my boss. And you know what? The next morning Dean spoke to me again. Like nothing had happened. "Good morning. How are you? Ready to take on a new challenge?" With such falseness in his voice, it made me want to wash my face with alcohol. I looked at him and I thought, aren't you ashamed? Do you really think I'm going to believe in this new role now that I've gotten a letter from a client? Before that, you didn't know my name. And now you're smiling. But I didn't say anything. Because there was no more room for diplomacy inside. I didn't want to smile and nod politely. I wanted to walk out into the center of the office, pound on the desk and say, "Let's play it straight. Which one of you ratted me out yesterday? Who wrote a request to IT to cut off my access? Who's hiding behind smiles right now because they're afraid of losing a client?" But I didn't. Because they were expecting it. They wanted me to snap. For me to become uncomfortable officially. And I didn't. I just started talking small, looking straight ahead, and doing things by the book. No more. Not 1 millimeter. The whole office felt the change. I was no longer carrying coffee, no longer helping with presentations. I wasn't saving someone else's mistakes. I took back my boundaries, and they didn't like it. Because without my quiet support, things started to fall apart. 3 days go by and I get another email from Harrison. He wants a report. Written solely by you, underlined in bold. After that, panic. Dean calls me into the conference room. And just like that, he starts talking. "We could certainly rethink our structure. We want you to be part of the project again. It's important that we work as a team." A team? What team, Dean? Where were you when they moved me to the printer? Where was the whole team when I was sitting around with paperwork like an intern with no Wi-Fi? I sat there listening to him talk himself into it. Because all he wants to do is save face in front of the client. Not to me. Not to himself. But in front of the name that pays the bills. I looked him in the eye and I said, The report's coming. On time. Only if I do it alone without your edits. He didn't expect it. Blinked. Choked. And nodded. Because there was no choice. When I returned to my seat, I saw coworkers whispering quietly. Some with surprise. Others with annoyance. And one of the junior analysts came over and said, "Are you serious? You're going to do a client report alone? It's a team task." I didn't even look up. I just said, "Where were you when I got kicked off the team?" He didn't say anything. Because there was nothing to say. I worked late into the night. Meticulous. Calm. Without a single mistake. I knew this report would be a moment of truth. Not just for the client. For the entire fake structure. I wasn't just writing a text. I was writing myself back into the company's history. On rights that no one could challenge. When the file went to Harrison, I felt a weight fall from my shoulders. Not relief, no. It was something else. The feeling that they could no longer speak for me. My job is now my voice. And the next day he responded. With one line. "This is exactly what I needed. Thank you personally." And you know what happened next? The office got a notice that the client contract had been renewed. With an increased budget. And the first thing our executives did was call a general meeting. To quote, celebrate team success. Team success. And there, in front of everyone, Dean stood with a fake smile and thanked everyone involved. And not once did he mention my name. I looked at him. And I laughed inside. Because this was a finale he didn't even realize was coming. I wasn't expecting to be named. I didn't expect an ounce of justice from those who peddle it on occasion. But I knew that this time their silence wasn't working against me. It was working for me. Because everyone in the room knew who made that report. Everyone knew who was thrown out the door. And who then came back and knocked not from the outside, but from the inside. After the meeting, Joan from HR came up to me. She hadn't said anything to me in person in a long time. All of a sudden, she came up to me. She said, "You've done the impossible." I couldn't take it. I looked at her. And I didn't say anything. Because right now, keeping silent was more important than saying anything. I packed my things and went home. On the table was still the same mug I'd brought here the first day. It said, "Do first, tell later." It's funny, right? I did it. And someone else did it for me. But that was their last time. Because now, when they come again asking for my guidance, cover, help me finish on time, I'm just going to look and ask, "What about your team?" This is the culmination. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Subscribe now to see the hero put everyone in their place. I knew they wouldn't be quiet. Because the corporate machine doesn't know how to keep quiet for long. It has to either digest you or throw you out. And I was stuck somewhere in their esophagus. And so the day came. I was invited to a meeting. Not personal. General. To a large conference room. Where they usually call you to share the strategic vector of the company's development. Sounds nice. But in fact it's a pathetic cover for dirty internal games. Everyone in the room was there. Tops, managers, sales, a couple of HR people I hadn't seen since last Halloween. And of course Dean. Standing at the flip chart, pretending to care about every number that flashed on the screen. When I walked in, he hesitated for a second. A split second. Not everyone noticed, but I did. Because he realized I'd have something to say today. I sat in the corner. Not because I was hiding, but so I could see everyone. I wasn't the quiet listener anymore. I was the one watching. At some point Harrison, yes, the client, appeared in the audience. Turns out he'd been called in as a guest. As an example of a successful partnership. And that's where things got interesting. Because Harrison didn't sit with the top. He came over to my row. He shook my hand. And he said, "It's good to see you again." Loudly. To the entire auditorium. I heard someone in the marketing department choking on their coffee. Dean was still trying to keep a straight face. He was talking about long-term plans, key roles, and team flexibility. And the whole time he never once looked in my direction. It was like I was just a wall, the kind of wall that gets in the way of hanging a vision board. And then when the question section came, Harrison raised his hand. He took his time. He spoke calmly. But every word hit the mark. "I want to thank one man," he began, "for precision, involvement, and professionalism that I don't often see, even in consultants on million-dollar contracts. Silence. Everyone knew who he was talking about, and yet he said my name. I'm talking about her. He nodded at me. And yes, I don't care what your internal titles are. She did the work. The rest of us discussed the slides. Afterward, Dean quickly interrupted. We're proud of everyone who participated in the process. But Harrison didn't let him finish. Not everyone. It's her. And that's when the silence in the room rang out. Not just awkward icy, because things like this are rarely said out loud, especially in front of the entire structure. After the meeting, the room began to slowly sprawl, as if everyone was trying to pretend that nothing had happened. Some hid behind their phone screens, some hurriedly discussed the weather. But I could see the main thing: no one could pretend not to know anymore. I was the last one out. Not because I was avoiding, because I wasn't in a hurry. I didn't need to participate in a corporate getaway. In the hallway, I heard two female employees from the marketing department talking over each other. It was awkward, but business. Yeah, I didn't even know she was doing all that. That's the key. They didn't know because they didn't want to know. They were comfortable believing the picture Dean was showing them. The next day, I was offered empowerment. A letter signed by the director. A bonus. A promotion. A new title. It's all pretty. It's all to cover it up. To shut me up. To stop me being a reminder. I read the letter and didn't reply right away. I went home. I made myself some soup. I put on some music. And I sat in silence. Because if you don't hear yourself, those who benefit from your silence decide for you. In the morning, I went to the office as usual. Same bag. In the same coffee jacket. But inside it wasn't the same. I went up to the principal's office. Knocked. I went in. I put the letter on the desk. I'm not refusing. I accept. But on my terms. No more filters. I only work directly. No layers like Dean. And if that condition doesn't suit you, I don't have it. He looked at me with the expression of a man who'd just been shown what a mirror looked like. It's a deal, he said. The conversation grew short after that. He didn't offer coffee, didn't pretend we were friends. And it was the right thing to do. Because there were no more illusions between me and this system. I didn't want to be on the team. I wanted to be heard. And if that required scorching the field, let there be ashes. I returned to my seat. Colleagues watched furtively. Some looked away quickly, some nodded, as if now, after official approval, they were allowed to notice me. But I didn't smile. Because this wasn't about status. It was about never being a shadow again. At lunchtime, I went out to the cafe across the street. Not with someone. Alone. I ordered myself a normal lunch, no thoughts of meetings. I ate slowly. No files, no slides. Just like a person who no longer had to prove anything to anyone. And in the evening, as the office began to thin out, I got an email from Harrison. Just one line. Thank you. You've shown that the truth is still louder than the headlines. I reread it several times. Not because I doubted it, but because for the first time in a long time I felt like yes, it wasn't for nothing. Everything. Every sleepless night. Every burrito I brought in silence. Every silent bear with me. Now I wasn't patient anymore. I was choosing. Where, with whom, and why. And you know what? It was more delicious than any reward. A week later, I changed my email signature. I took out assistant. I wrote strategic analyst, specializing in accuracy and consequences. No smiley faces. No respectfully. Just a fact. And that's when it got interesting. People who'd been passing me by before started coming to me. Little phrases like, how did you do? Aren't you scared? Do you really think you can survive like that? I looked at them and thought, guys, I'm not surviving. I'm living. Unlike you guys who are drowning in comfort and silence. And the weird thing was I started to hear myself. I no longer argued mentally in the evenings. No more scrolling through phrases that should have been said. Because I'd already said them. In that room. In the office. In myself. On Friday I came home, turned on some old music and pulled out a box of photos. Among them was the one of me on my first day at the office. With a naive smile and a shadow of hope in my eyes. I looked at it and smiled a different smile. Not naive. A strong one. I'd been through it. And I didn't become one of them. I was still me. And that's my victory. I didn't tell this story to be pitied. I didn't tell it to get applause. I'm telling it because too many people sit in those glass offices thinking that if they're comfortable, they won't be touched. That if they do things quietly, they'll be appreciated. No, it won't. You'll be forgotten. They'll rewrite you. They'll rename your work in an Excel file and put someone else's name in it. All with a smile and a "you understand." But if you look up one day and say, "Enough," they get scared. Because the system doesn't know what to do with those who don't ask permission. So there you go. I didn't ask permission. I just did it. And when it became clear who was behind the case, they realized they couldn't take me down. So if you're reading this right now, sitting at someone else's report, making a presentation that will be signed with someone else's name, know this: you're not alone. Just stand up. Find your voice. Not for their sake. For yourself. For the one in the mirror. Because one day you too will look at your mug and say, "I'm the only one drinking here now. By right. Because I stayed." On Monday I brought myself a new thermos. It was bright red. It stood on my desk like a flag. Not to show off but to remind me. Every sip is like an affirmation. I'm here. Not by accident. Not out of the kindness of my superiors. But because I earned it. And when one of those who used to whisper behind my back came up to me at lunch and asked, "Can you help me with the report?" I smiled. That's right, calm. Now I have a fixed lunch. And no multitasking. He nodded. And understood. He got it. And I picked up my mug again. And I went to lunch. The first. Not the last. Forever the first.